In the last 24 hours, the room changes, not in ways you can always see, but in ways you can feel. The machines grow quieter, the conversations grow slower, and the pauses between words start to matter more than the words themselves. This is the time when people stop asking about medicine and start asking about meaning. They ask softly, sometimes with their eyes, sometimes with a whisper that barely reaches the air. They ask if they are alone. They ask if it's okay to rest. They ask if the people they love will be all right. Often they don't ask directly. The question lives in the silence between breaths, in the way a hand tightens around yours, in the long look that says more than any sentence ever could. In these moments, my role isn't to fix or explain. It's to stay, to listen, to be present when answers aren't clear and fear doesn't need correcting. The last day isn't about endings the way we imagine them. It's about small truths rising gently to the surface, about love being felt without being spoken, about realizing that what mattered most was never very complicated at all. In the last 24 hours, something shifts. It's not sudden and it's not dramatic. It's more like the room exhales. The urgency that once filled the air slowly fades, and what's left is a quiet honesty. People stop pretending they're not tired. They stop trying to be brave in the way the world defines bravery. And in that space, questions begin to surface, not the kind that can be answered with facts or timelines, but the kind that come from a place deep inside where fear and love sit side by side. One of the first things patients ask is something that sounds simple, but never really is. They ask, "Am I okay?" Sometimes they say it out loud. Sometimes it comes as a look, searching my face, trying to read what words might not say. They're not asking if their body is okay. They already know the answer to that. They're asking if they, as a person, are okay, if the way they lived was enough, if who they were mattered. It's a question wrapped in vulnerability, and it often comes after a long pause, as if they're gathering courage to ask something they've been holding back for a while. Another question comes quietly, almost like an apology. Is this normal? They ask it when their body does something unfamiliar, when they feel more tired than before, when words don't come as easily, when eating feels like too much. They worry they're doing something wrong. Even now, there's a need to be reassured that they're not failing at the end of life. Their body slowing down isn't a mistake. I see relief wash over them when they hear that this is part of the process, that nothing they're experiencing means they've done anything wrong. Often they ask about time, but not in numbers. They don't usually ask, how long do I have? Not in the last 24 hours. And instead, they ask things like, is it close or will it be soon? What they're really asking is whether they need to say what's left to be said, whether there's still time to hold on or if it's okay to let go. Sometimes they ask because they're tired of waiting. Other times because they're afraid it's happening too fast. Both feelings can exist in the same breath. One of the most common questions is about the people they love. Will they be okay? This question carries more weight than almost any other. It comes from parents worried about children, partners worried about being replaced or forgotten, friends worried about leaving someone behind with too much pain. Even when their bodies are weak, their concern for others stays strong. Sometimes they ask it again and again, as if hoping the answer will change or sink in deeper each time. Reassurance helps, but what they really need is to feel that their love has been received, that it will continue even after they are gone. Some ask for permission, though. They don't always use those words. Is it okay if I rest? I'm so tired. I can't do this anymore. These moments are delicate. They're not asking to die. They're asking if they're allowed to stop fighting. Many people have spent their lives being strong for others. In the last hours, that strength becomes heavy. When they hear that it's okay to rest, that they don't have to push anymore, something softens. Their breathing changes, their shoulders relax, and sometimes that permission is the greatest gift they receive. There are questions about pain, but not always physical pain. Will this hurt? Can mean many things. It can mean fear of suffering. It can mean fear of the unknown. It can mean fear of the unknown. It can mean fear of being alone when it happens. They want to know they won't be abandoned in the hardest moment. They want to know someone will notice if they're uncomfortable, if they're scared. Reassurance comes not just from words, but from presence, from staying close, from not rushing away when the room grows quiet. Some patients ask about unfinished things. Did I do enough? Was I a good parent? Do you think they know I love them? These questions often come late at night when the lights are dim and the world feels far away. Regret can surface here, but so can clarity. They remember moments that mattered, small ones, ordinary ones, a laugh, a shared meal, a hand held. They don't talk much about achievements or success. They talk about connection, about whether they were kind, whether they were loved. Sometimes the question is simply, will you stay? It might not be said directly, but it's there in the way they reach out, in the way they relax when someone sits down, in the way their breathing steadies when they're not alone. Presence matters more than anything else in these hours. Words become less important. Silence becomes a language of its own. Being there without trying to fix or fill the space answers many questions without speaking. There are moments when patients ask about what comes next, but not in a religious or philosophical way. It's softer than that. What happens after this, it's asked without expectation of certainty. They're not looking for absolute answers. They're looking for comfort in the not knowing. Sometimes the most honest response is acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, but that they won't face whatever comes alone, that love doesn't disappear just because the body does. Some questions repeat. The same one over and over. It's not because they forget the answer. It's because hearing it brings peace, and peace doesn't always last. Fear ebbs and flows. Repetition becomes a way to anchor themselves. Repetition becomes a way to anchor themselves. It's time they ask. It's a request for reassurance in that moment, not a test of memory. Patience matters here. So does gentleness. There are also questions that never get spoken. They live in the quiet, in the way someone stares at the ceiling, in the way tears form but don't fall. These questions are about meaning, about whether their life had value, whether they'll be remembered, about whether it's okay to stop trying to make sense of everything. You can feel these questions in the room, even when no one says a word. In the last 24 hours, patients often become more honest than they've ever been. There's no energy left for pretending. Emotions rise without warning. Gratitude, sadness, relief, fear, love. Sometimes all within minutes. Questions come from that honesty. They're raw, they're real, they're human. What surprises many people is how rarely patients ask about death itself. They're more focused on comfort, connection, and reassurance. They want to know they're not alone. They want to know they're loved. They want to know they can rest. These questions reflect what truly matters when everything else falls away. As their bodies slow down, their questions become fewer but deeper. Sometimes a single look replaces many words. A squeeze of the hand asks, "Are you here?" A long exhale asks, "Is it okay now?" Responding doesn't always require speech. Sometimes it's enough to sit quietly, to match their breathing, to let them feel your presence without expectation. There are moments when patients seem to be listening to something no one else can hear. Their questions stop. Their focus turns inward. This isn't withdrawal. It's transition. The need for answers fades as something else takes its place. A kind of knowing that doesn't require explanation. In these hours, I've learned that the most important thing isn't having the right words. It's being willing to witness the questions without rushing them, to honor the courage it takes to ask them. To understand that these questions aren't problems to solve, but expressions of being human at the edge of life. Every patient is different, but the questions echo across rooms, across lives. Am I okay? Will they be okay? Is it time? Can I rest? Will you stay? These questions carry the weight of a lifetime, and they deserve to be held gently, without judgment, without hurry, in the quiet space where endings are not sharp, but soft, where love becomes simpler, where presence becomes everything, where the room grows still and the questions finally feel heard. In the last 24 hours, many of the most important questions are never spoken out loud. They don't arrive as sentences with clear beginnings and endings. They arrive as pauses, as glances, as a hand reaching out and holding on just a little longer than before. These questions live in the spaces between words, and learning to hear them takes time, patience, and a willingness to sit with silence without trying to fix it. Silence near the end of life is not empty, it's full of memories, fears, love, and unfinished thoughts. When a patient grows quiet, it doesn't mean they have nothing left to say. Often it means what they're feeling is too deep for language. Their body may be weak, but their inner world is still very much alive. The unspoken questions surface when the noise of the outside world fades and only what truly matters remains. One of the most common unspoken questions is about presence. Are you here with me? It shows up in the way their eyes follow you across the room, in the way they relax when they hear footsteps, in the way their breathing becomes steadier when someone sits beside them instead of standing at the door. They may not ask you to stay, but their body asks. Leaving the room too quickly can feel like an answer they weren't ready to receive. Touch becomes a language of its own. A patient may squeeze your hand, not because they're in pain, but because they're asking something without words. They may be asking for reassurance. or grounding or connection. Sometimes it's simply, do you feel me? Touch says what voices no longer can. It says, I'm here. You're not alone. You still matter. Another unspoken question is about fear. Fear doesn't always announce itself as panic or tears. Often it's quiet. It's the wide eyes in the dark, the sudden alertness after hours of drowsiness, the subtle tension in the body. They may not say, I'm scared, but their silence is asking, is this okay? Is what's happening supposed to feel like this? Answering that question means noticing, slowing down, and responding with calm instead of explanations. Many patients carry unspoken questions about unfinished business. They may stare at the ceiling, replaying moments from their lives. Regrets surface here, but so do reconciliations that happen quietly inside. The question might be, did I make peace with enough? Or is it too late to forgive myself? These questions don't need answers from anyone else. They need space. They need permission to exist without being corrected or dismissed. They're unspoken questions about identity. When someone has been a caregiver, a provider, a protector their whole life, losing that role can feel unsettling. In the last hours, when they can no longer do for others, the question becomes, who am I now? It shows up in restlessness or in the struggle to accept help. Being gently reminded that their worth was never tied to what they could do is one way of responding, even if it's only conveyed through tone and presence. Some questions are about dignity. Patients may not say, do I still have dignity? But they show concern about how they look, how they're being cared for, who sees them in vulnerable moments, respecting privacy, explaining what you're doing, and speaking to them as a whole person. Answers that question without needing to name it. Dignity is felt, not explained. The unspoken question of being remembered often lingers. It lives in the way they talk about old stories or repeat certain memories. It's a way of saying, this mattered, I mattered. Listening without rushing, without correcting details, honors that question. The facts are less important than the meaning behind them. They're not telling stories to pass time. They're leaving pieces of themselves behind. Some patients grow very quiet, not because they're withdrawing from the world, but because they're turning inward. This can worry families who fear their loved one is slipping away too soon, but often this quiet is where important internal questions are being held. Questions about acceptance, about readiness, about letting go. Interrupting this process with constant conversation can feel intrusive, even when it comes from love. Breathing itself becomes a question. Changes in rhythm, pauses between breaths, sighs that seem to come from deep inside. These are not just physical signs. They're part of communication. The body asking, can I slow down now? Responding with calm presence instead of alarm helps the body feel safe enough to continue its natural rhythm. There are unspoken questions about pain that go beyond the physical, emotional pain, spiritual pain, relational pain. A patient may grimace not because their body hurts, but because a memory surfaced or a realization landed. Asking gently without assumption allows them to share if they want to, or simply to be seen if they don't. And, sometimes the unspoken question is about permission to stop talking. Families often encourage conversation, afraid silence means giving up, but silence can be a form of closeness. A patient may be asking, can we just be here together without words, sitting quietly, holding a hand, sharing the same air answers that question more honestly than any speech could. There are moments when a patient seems to be listening to something beyond the room. Their gaze softens. Their attention drifts. The unspoken question here isn't one of fear, but of curiosity, of transition. It's as if they're asking, is this the place I'm supposed to be right now? Respecting that moment rather than pulling them back honors their process. Families also ask unspoken questions through the patient. The tension in the room, the careful watching, the holding of breath, patients feel this. They may become quieter to protect their loved ones from seeing more decline. The unspoken question becomes, how do I take care of them even now? Creating a calm environment helps answer that, letting the patient know it's okay to focus on themselves. As the hours pass, the need for verbal reassurance often decreases. What remains is the need for steady presence. The questions don't disappear. They simply change form. They become slower, softer, more internal. The answers too become simpler. A warm blanket, a gentle voice, a familiar touch. There are times when a patient's eyes open, suddenly searching. This is not always confusion. Often it's an unspoken check-in. Are you still there? Meeting their gaze, even briefly, can settle something deep inside them. It's a reminder that connection still exists, even as the body weakens. Unspoken questions also arise around control. Losing control of the body can be frightening. Small choices matter here, asking before adjusting a pillow, explaining what you're doing. These acts respond to the question, do I still have a say? Control doesn't have to be big to be meaningful. As speech fades, the heart often becomes louder. Emotions surface without filters. Tears may come without explanation. Smiles may appear unexpectedly. These are not random. They are expressions of questions being answered internally about love, about peace, about acceptance. In the last stretch of life, the unspoken questions are often more honest than spoken ones ever were. They bypass politeness and go straight to what matters. They ask for presence instead of promises, for witnessing instead of fixing, for gentleness instead of certainty. Being with someone in these moments means learning to listen with more than ears. It means noticing shifts in breathing, changes in expression, the way energy moves in the room. It means understanding that not every question needs a verbal answer and not every silence needs to be filled. The greatest unspoken question may be, am I safe? Safe to let go? Safe to rest? Safe to be exactly where I am? Answering that question comes not from words, but from how we show up, from staying calm, from moving slowly, from honoring the moment without rushing it. As the room grows quieter and the space between breaths widens, the questions soften too. They lose their sharp edges. They become less about fear and more about surrender, less about meeting answers and more about feeling held. In that space, silence becomes a kind of conversation, one where love is understood without explanation, where presence speaks louder than words, where the unspoken questions finally feel met without ever being asked. In the last 24 hours, questions also rise from a place deeper than fear or curiosity. They come from memory, from a lifetime lived, from moments that return quietly without invitation. These questions are not always clear, even to the person asking them. They surface as reflections, as sudden emotions, as shifts in tone. They are less about what is happening now and more about what has already happened and what it meant. Many patients begin to revisit their lives in fragments, not as a full story, but as scenes, a childhood kitchen, a familiar laugh, a mistake that still feels close. The question beneath these memories is often, was it enough love given? Enough forgiveness offered, enough presence shown when it mattered. They don't usually ask this directly. Instead, they might say, I keep thinking about the past, or I don't know why this memory keeps coming back. What they're really doing is measuring their life, not by accomplishments, but by moments of connection. There is often a quiet question about forgiveness. Did I forgive enough? And just as often, was I forgiven? Regret doesn't always come from big things. Sometimes it comes from small moments that were missed. Words not said, time not taken. In the last hours, these thoughts can feel heavy, not because the person is being judged, but because they are judging themselves. Being present without trying to reframe or dismiss these feelings allows them to surface and soften in their own time. Some patients begin to speak about people who are no longer alive. They mention them casually as if they were still part of the room. This isn't confusion, it's connection. The question beneath these moments is often, am I still connected to those I loved, or will I be reunited with what I lost? Even without specific beliefs, the sense of connection feels real. Listening without correction honors that experience and allows comfort to exist without needing explanation. Another question that appears is about identity over time. Who was I really? This comes up when patients talk about different versions of themselves, the younger self, the struggling self, the self that made choices they wouldn't make again. There's a tenderness in these reflections, a desire to be seen as a whole person, not just as someone at the end of life. When they talk, they're not asking for evaluation. They're asking for acknowledgement. There is often a moment when patients question their own strength. Was I strong enough? This isn't about physical endurance. It's about emotional survival, about carrying grief, responsibility, loss. Many people realize only at the end how much they carried without complaint. Saying nothing doesn't mean they felt nothing. In these hours, that realization can bring both pride and sadness. Being witnessed in that truth matters more than reassurance. Some questions are about love given and love received. Did I love well? Was I loved the way I needed to be? These questions surface when Patients talk about relationships that shape them, some with warmth, some with pain. The last hours don't erase complicated feelings. Love can exist alongside disappointment. Acknowledging both allows honesty without forcing resolution. Patients sometimes express concern about how they will be remembered, not in a dramatic way, but quietly. I hope they remember the good parts. This is not vanity. It's a human desire to leave behind something gentle, something kind. They want to know their story won't be reduced to illness or decline. Sharing memories, reflecting back the ways they mattered, helps answer this question in a way that feels real. There are questions about responsibility. Did I do right by them? Parents think about children. Partners think about promises made and broken. Caregivers think about times they were tired or impatient. These questions come with a weight that doesn't need to be lifted, only held. Trying to resolve them too quickly can feel dismissive. Sometimes the greatest comfort is allowing the question to exist without rushing it toward closure. As energy fades, some patients question their own readiness. Am I ready for this? Readiness is not a clear line. It comes and goes. Someone can feel ready one moment and afraid the next. That doesn't mean they're failing. It means they're human. Normalizing that back and forth helps ease the pressure to feel one specific way at the end. There are also questions about control and surrender. Have I done all I can? Letting go is not the same as giving up. Many patients struggle with this distinction. They've spent their lives being responsible, proactive, involved. Surrender can feel unfamiliar. Offering reassurance that rest is not defeat allows space for peace to grow naturally. Some patients become quieter not because they have nothing left to say, but because they're listening inwardly. This inward focus often carries questions about meaning. What did my life stand for? Meaning doesn't always arrive as an answer. Sometimes it arrives as a feeling, a sense of completeness, or simply a soft acceptance. Silence supports this process better than conversation. Questions about pain also shift in these hours. Physical pain may still matter, but emotional pain often rises to the surface. Grief for what's ending, grief for what never happened. These emotions don't always need to be named. Being present without trying to redirect them allows them to pass more gently. Some patients ask questions that sound ordinary but carry deeper meaning. Is it nighttime? Is it morning? They are orienting themselves not just to time, but to where they are in the process. Each answer grounds them. It reminds them they are still here, still connected to the world around them. There are moments of clarity that surprise everyone. A patient who has been quiet suddenly speaks with intention. The question might be, can you tell them I love them, or did I say thank you? These moments are not accidents. They are priorities surfacing. Helping carry those messages is one of the most meaningful responses possible. As the body weakens, questions about dependency arise. I have burden. This question often remains unspoken, but it's present. Reassurance matters here, but so does tone. The way care is given communicates worth more than words ever could. Gentle movements, respectful explanations, these answer the question in ways that feel true. Patients also question their own emotions. Why do I feel calm? Or why am I not afraid right now? Peace can feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. Letting them know that calm is allowed, that it doesn't mean something is wrong, helps them trust the experience rather than resist it. In the final stretch, questions slow down. Thoughts become simpler, focus narrows. The questions that remain are no longer about the past or the future, but about the moment. Am I comfortable? Am I alone? These are answered through care, press, and attention. Sometimes the question is simply, is it okay to stop talking? Fatigue makes conversation heavy. Silence becomes a relief. Respecting that silence honors their needs more than encouraging continued interaction. There are also questions that feel almost childlike. Can you sit here? Can you hold my hand? These are not signs of regression. They are signs of trust, of returning to what feels safe when everything else is falling away. As breathing changes, the body begins to ask its own questions. Can I slow down? Can I rest longer between breaths? Responding calmly helps the body feel supported rather than rushed. Near the very end, questions dissolve into sensations, warmth, stillness, the presence of others. The need for answers fades as the need for safety and peace takes over. In these hours, questions are no longer about understanding life. They are about feeling held within it. They are about knowing that even now, even here, they are not alone, that their life was seen, that their presence mattered, that they are allowed to rest, that they are allowed to be exactly where they are, without explanation, without defense, without needing to do or say anything more.